There's a sentence carved into more funeral programs, more hospice room plaques, more stained glass windows than almost any other line in the entire Bible. In my Father's house are many mansions. Most people who've heard it pictured the same thing without ever being told to. Heaven as real estate. Rooms. A palace with your name already on a door somewhere down a very long hallway, waiting for you to arrive and move in.
That picture is doing a lot of quiet work in how people imagine the afterlife, and it's built almost entirely on a translation choice from 400 years ago that didn't mean what it sounds like it means today, layered on top of an even older translation choice that didn't mean what people assume either.
Here's the first problem. In 1611, when the King James translators chose the word mansion, they weren't picturing a palace. Nobody in 17th century England was. The word meant something much smaller and much more temporary, a stopping place, a stage of a journey, the kind of modest lodging a traveler used for a single night before moving on. It comes from a Latin word, mansio, that named the way stations built along Roman roads, spaced out so a traveler always had somewhere to stop before the next leg. Not a destination, a rest along the way.
And here's the second, deeper problem, the one that stays hidden even once you know the first. The actual Greek word standing behind mansions isn't a noun that showed up once and vanished. It's the noun form of a verb Jesus uses obsessively over and over, just one chapter later, in a passage almost every reader treats as a completely separate topic. Abide in me, and I in you. 14 mentions of many rooms. 15, abide, abide, abide. Same Greek root both times. Nobody ever told you that.
Ask most people what John 14:2 is describing, and you'll get some version of the same answer. Heaven has a lot of individual rooms, prepared in advance, one for each believer, in a structure large enough to hold everyone who's ever trusted Jesus. It's a comforting picture, and it isn't entirely wrong to find comfort in it. But it's built on an English word doing something the original language was never asking it to do. The confusion starts with mansion itself, and it's worth being precise about exactly where the drift happened, because it happened twice, in two different languages, centuries apart.
The Greek word in John 14:2 is monē, the noun form of the verb meno, to remain or to stay. When Jerome translated the Greek New Testament into Latin for the Vulgate, he rendered monē as mansio, a completely reasonable choice at the time, because mansio meant exactly the same thing as the Greek word it was translating, a stopping place, a stage of a journey, the kind of way station the Roman postal and travel system had built at regular intervals along its major roads, so that no traveler ever had to go too far without a place to rest. A mansio wasn't where you lived, it was where you stopped.
13 centuries later, when English translators reached for a word to render the Latin mansiones, they picked mansions. Again, a reasonable choice in 1611, because the English word still carried something close to its Latin root at the time, a dwelling place, a stopping place, not yet the palatial estate it would come to mean. But English kept drifting after that. Over the following centuries, mansion gradually attached itself almost exclusively to the largest, grandest houses, the residences of the wealthy, the word losing its older sense of a place to stay and gaining an entirely new sense of an enormous house. By the time a modern reader encounters "In my Father's house are many mansions," the word has fully completed its journey from way station to palace, and nothing in the sentence stops that image from forming.
So the phrase most people have built an entire afterlife picture on is standing on a translation of a translation, and both translations have aged in ways that quietly changed what the sentence sounds like it's promising. Here's the two-part key the text actually hands you once you go back past both English and Latin to the Greek word itself, and then follow that word forward into the very next chapter. The first part is what monē actually names, not a room, not a wing of a palace, an abiding place, somewhere someone remains, stays, doesn't leave. The noun is built directly from meno, to remain, the same verb root running underneath words like permanent and imminent in English descendants of the same Indo-European family. The core image isn't size or grandeur, it's continuity, a place defined by the fact that you stay there, not by how ornate it is.
The second part is the connection almost no English-reading believer has ever been shown, because it's invisible in translation. One chapter after "In my Father's house are many monē," Jesus delivers the most repeated instruction in the entire discourse. Abide in me, and I in you. The Greek word behind abide, every single time it appears in that passage, and it appears roughly 10 times in the space of 11 verses, is meno, the exact verb monē was built from.
John 14:2 and John 15:4 aren't two separate images stitched together by a common author. They're the same word doing the same fundamental work one chapter apart. And English has been hiding that connection behind two different translation choices for 4 centuries.
Once you see it, the sentence stops being a real estate promise and starts being a relational one. Many monē in the Father's house isn't primarily describing square footage. It's describing many places to remain, an offer extended to everyone who will go on, one chapter later, to be told exactly how remaining actually works. Not passively waiting for assigned real estate, but staying attached, the way a branch stays attached to the vine it draws its life from. If the fact that many mansions and abide in me are the exact same Greek word is new to you, that's exactly the kind of thing this channel exists to dig up. A like helps more people find it. To see exactly how far this word travels through the rest of the passage, we need to follow it past chapter 14 into 15, and then into the letters that came after.
John 14:2-3 gives the promise in full. In my Father's house are many mansions. If it were not so, I would have told you. I go to prepare a place for you. And if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come again and receive you unto myself, that where I am, there ye may be also. Read slowly, the passage is already leaning away from architecture and toward presence. The point isn't the place, it's that where I am, there ye may be also. The place is instrumental. Being with him is the actual content of the promise.
John 14:23 closes the loop within the same discourse, using the noun form again in a way most translations obscure a second time. If a man love me, he will keep my words, and my Father will love him, and we will come unto him and make our abode with him. Make our abode there is, once again, monē, the identical word from verse 2, now used not for a place prepared far away in the future, but for God coming to dwell with a person in the present. The mansion isn't only a room waiting in heaven, it's also, in the very same chapter, a description of God taking up residence inside an ordinary, present relationship. Most English readers never connect verse 2 and verse 23 as the same image, because mansions and make our abode look like two unrelated phrases doing two unrelated jobs.
John 15:4-10 is where the verb form takes over entirely. Abide in me, and I in you. As the branch cannot bear fruit of itself, except it abide in the vine, no more can ye, except ye abide in me. He that abideth in me, and I in him, the same bringeth forth much fruit. If ye abide in me, and my words abide in you, ye shall ask what ye will, and it shall be done unto you. Continue ye in my love. 10 occurrences of monē in 11 verses, describing a branch's physical, uninterrupted attachment to the vine that feeds it. Cut it loose for even a moment, and it withers, disconnected from the one source keeping it alive. That image, a branch staying attached rather than a room being furnished, is what abide is actually describing at its most concrete physical level before it's ever used relationally.
The pattern doesn't stop at the gospel. John's first epistle keeps reaching for the identical verb, well after the gospel narrative has ended. Let that therefore abide in you, which ye have heard from the beginning. 1 John 2:24. The anointing which ye have received of him abideth in you. 1 John 2:27. Abide in him, that when he shall appear, we may have confidence. 1 John 2:28. He that keepeth his commandments dwelleth in him, and he in him. 1 John 3:24. Dwelleth there, once again, monē. He that dwelleth in love dwelleth in God, and God in him. 1 John 4:13. The same word twice in one sentence, translated the same way both times, but silently disconnected in most readers' minds from the mansions promised 3 chapters and 1 book earlier.
So here's what the text is actually building. Once every one of these scattered English words, mansions, abode, abide, dwell, continue, gets traced back to the single Greek root actually running underneath all of them. John 14:2 was never promising real estate in the sense modern readers default to. It was opening a thread about remaining, about a relationship that continues rather than a property that gets assigned. The many mansions are many places to remain, plural not because heaven needs enough square footage for a large population, but because the offer of ongoing presence is being extended individually to everyone who receives it. John 15 then spends 11 verses explaining in the most physical terms available what remaining actually requires. Staying attached, the way a living branch stays attached to a vine, continuously, not as a one-time arrival, but as an ongoing condition that can be maintained or broken. A branch doesn't move into the vine once and then coast. It stays joined continuously, or it dies. That's the operative picture behind abide, and it's the same picture, just narrower and more physical, sitting underneath many mansions 1 chapter earlier.
And John 14:23 shows the relationship isn't only something offered in a future place, it's already available in the present. We will come unto him and make our abode with him. The same noun, monē, describing God's presence taking up residence in an ordinary life right now, not only a room prepared somewhere far off for later. The promise in verse 2 and the presence in verse 23 are the same offer, described at 2 different distances, one future and spatial, one present and relational, using the identical Greek word both times.
Put the whole thread together, and the picture that emerges is strikingly different from a palace with a hallway of individually assigned rooms. It's closer to an ongoing invitation to stay, extended now in a present relationship that has to be actively maintained the way a branch stays joined to a vine, and extended again in whatever form that relationship takes on the other side of death, in a place Jesus describes preparing specifically so the relationship can continue rather than end. Not real estate, residency. The difference between being assigned a room and being kept in a relationship that doesn't let go.
The same root threading through John 14 and John 15 also explains something about how easily English readers separate ideas the original language keeps welded together. English has to reach for at least 5 or 6 different words to cover the ground one Greek verb covers on its own. Mansions, abide, remain, dwell, continue, abode, and every one of those English words carries its own separate connotation, its own separate mental picture. Mansion pulls towards size and luxury. Abide pulls towards an almost archaic devotional register, a word people rarely use outside of hymns and this exact passage. Dwell pulls towards ordinary residence. Continue pulls towards duration without any spatial image at all. 4 English words, 4 different pictures, 1 Greek root behind every single one of them.
This isn't a flaw unique to the King James either. Modern translations mostly keep the same fracture, rendering monē as rooms or dwelling places in John 14, while still rendering meno as abide or remain in John 15, an improvement over mansions in one place. But the connection between the 2 chapters still depends entirely on a reader noticing a shared root in Greek that no English translation, old or new, fully preserves on the surface. The effect across 4 centuries of English Bibles has been to let one of John's most repeated and carefully built verbal threads scatter into what looks like several unrelated topics: a promise about heaven in chapter 14, an agricultural metaphor about vines in chapter 15, and a recurring devotional word in the first epistle, each treated by most readers, most sermons, and most study guides as its own separate subject. Trace the Greek instead of the English, and all 3 collapse back into one continuous idea, developed patiently across a gospel and its follow-up letters: presence that stays, offered first as a place prepared, then as a vine to stay joined to, then as a condition of ongoing love. God Himself takes up residence inside.
Here's what this means for anyone who has spent years picturing heaven primarily as a floor plan. The promise was never mainly about square footage or the size of the room with your name on it. It was about whether the relationship the room represents is one you're actually staying joined to right now, today, the way a branch stays joined to the vine it depends on for everything it produces. That reframes the passage from a comfort you receive passively in the future into an invitation that has present, ongoing content in the meantime.
It also changes what it looks like to draw comfort from this verse at a funeral, which is where most people actually encounter it. The comfort was never meant to rest on imagining an impressive building. It was meant to rest on the same thing John 15 spends 11 verses describing: an unbroken relationship, one that continues past the point where a body stops functioning. Because the word underneath the promise was never primarily about architecture in the first place. Where I am, there ye may be also, is the actual content of the hope. Presence continuing, not property changing hands.
And it puts a quiet, practical question in front of anyone reading this in the present tense rather than only anticipating it as a future one. Abiding, in John 15's own vocabulary, isn't a one-time arrival you complete and then stop thinking about. It's a branch's continuous, moment-to-moment attachment, something that can be maintained, or, the passage warns just as plainly, broken. Every branch in me that beareth not fruit, He taketh away. The many monē aren't only being prepared somewhere far off. The same word describes what's being asked of you right now, in whether you're staying attached to the thing that's actually feeding you or drifting loose from it a little at a time without quite noticing. Step back and look at the whole shape of it.
One Greek word, monē, meaning an abiding place, built directly from meno, to remain, not a noun about size, but a noun about staying. One historical drift in 2 stages across 2 languages and roughly 19 centuries. Monē to the Latin mansio, a way station on a road, itself an accurate rendering. Then mansio to the English mansion, accurate again in 1611, and then slowly, silently, drifting over the following centuries into a word that now means almost the opposite of where it started. Not a modest stop along a journey, but the largest, grandest house imaginable.
One buried connection hiding in plain sight 1 chapter later, the same root reappearing 10 times in 11 verses as abide, describing a branch's physical, continuous attachment to the vine that keeps it alive, the most concrete possible picture of what remaining actually requires. One thread running forward past the gospel into John's letters, describing an anointing that abides, a love that abides, a life abiding in God, and God abiding back, the identical verb doing the identical relational work in nearly every book John ever wrote. Picture a lit doorway at the end of a long road at nightfall, not a mansion glimpsed from the outside, grand and closed, but a door standing open, a room already warmed, someone inside who has been staying there, waiting specifically for you to stay there too. That's the picture underneath the word. Not a hallway of separate rooms, one continuous invitation to remain.
If you've spent years picturing this verse as a floor plan, you're not alone. And the picture was never meant to be corrected by taking away your comfort. It's meant to be corrected by relocating it from the size of a building you'll see later to the durability of a relationship you can actually test right now, today, in the ordinary sense of whether you're staying joined to it or quietly drifting loose. If today's a day that's hard to imagine remaining anywhere good, this word doesn't ask you to manufacture a feeling of secure belonging you don't actually have. It asks something more concrete and, in its own way, more reachable. Whether there's one place, one relationship, one small daily practice you can stay attached to today, the way a branch stays attached to a vine, not because you've mastered some emotional state, but because you simply haven't let go.
If you're grieving someone, and this verse is the one you're leaning on right now, let it lean the way the text actually built it to. Not on the size of a room being prepared, but on the promise sitting inside. Where I am, there ye may be also. Presence continuing, not property changing hands. If this changed how you read many mansions, tell us in the comments. Subscribe. This channel exists for exactly this kind of word. The one that got scattered across 6 different English words. Over 4 centuries. Waiting for someone to trace it back to the single root. It never actually stopped being.
God bless you.